The temperature outside the wolf's lair hovers below zero. Snow drifts between pine trees as guards stamp their boots, their breath turning to mist. Inside the dim concrete corridors, the air feels heavier, not from cold but from defeat. It is late January 1943. Adolf Hitler stands hunched over a sprawling war map lit by a single lamp. Red pins mark the Soviet front, and every day more pins disappear. His once steady hand trembles as he slides a magnifying glass across the city of Stalingrad. There, the German Sixth Army is trapped, more than 300,000 men encircled by the Red Army. For weeks, Hitler has promised salvation. He ordered Goering to resupply them by air, boasting that the Luftwaffe could deliver 500 tons of supplies daily, but it never came close. Pilots froze mid-flight. Supplies fell into Soviet hands. The men below starved and froze, waiting for orders that would never save them. In the wolf's lair, silence hangs thick. Field Marshal Keitel enters papers, trembling in his gloved hands. He doesn't need to speak. Hitler already knows. The Sixth Army is finished. Paulus is asking permission to surrender, but Hitler's face tightens. His jaw clenches until the muscles in his temple twitch. "No," he mutters. "They will hold. They must hold." He points to the map again, as if by force of will he could redraw the front lines. But even he knows it's an illusion. When the door closes, his aides hear him whisper something almost inaudible. The gods have deserted us. That night, in the silence of the wolf's lair, Hitler faces a truth he cannot yet speak aloud. The war he started, the war he promised would bring a 1,000-year Reich, has turned against him. Moment of realization has come, and it will haunt him until the very end. By the first weeks of 1943, the world's most feared army was dying in the ruins of a single city. Stalingrad, a shattered maze of concrete and ash, had become the graveyard of the Wehrmacht. For months, the German Sixth Army fought street by street, basement by basement, against an enemy that refused to die. In the freezing dark, men huddled in the wreckage of burned factories, surviving on horsemeat and melted snow. Soviets called them the frozen invaders. Every day, more messages reached Hitler's headquarters. Field Marshal Paulus begged for permission to break out to retreat while some strength remained. But Hitler refused. "Surrender is forbidden," he said. "The Sixth Army will stand as a fortress." To him, Stalingrad wasn't just a city, it was a symbol. To lose it meant to admit weakness, and that he could never do. Inside the encirclement, German radios sputtered with desperation. Officers spoke in a code whispering about dwindling ammunition, soldiers dying of frostbite, medics sawing off limbs without morphine. And still the orders from Berlin never changed. Hold the line. Goering had promised Hitler that the Luftwaffe could deliver salvation from the skies. But when? The weather turned savage. The transports fell from the clouds like stones. The supply effort collapsed. Out of the daily 500 tons needed, barely 100 ever arrived, often less. The Sixth Army was starving, its tanks frozen, its spirit gone. By late January, the Soviets tightened the noose. Hitler's generals begged him to accept the inevitable. But in his bunker he paced endlessly, refusing to face the truth. "The army will fight to the last man," he insisted, even as he knew the end had already come. On January 31st, 1943, Paulus surrendered. It was the first time in Hitler's reign that a German field marshal had been taken alive. When he heard the news, Hitler erupted. He accused Paulus of cowardice, of betrayal. But witnesses later said that when the shouting stopped, he sat down in silence, staring blankly at the wall. Something in him broke that day. The illusion of invincibility gone, the belief that destiny was on his side gone. From that frozen battlefield on the Volga, the road to Berlin's downfall had begun. After Stalingrad, Hitler needed redemption. He needed a victory so grand it would erase the humiliation that haunted him. That victory, he decided, would come at Kursk by spring of 1943. Hitler had gathered the largest armoured force ever assembled. Nearly 3,000 tanks, thousands of guns, and 2 million men. He called it Operation Citadel. The goal? To crush the Soviet bulge around Kursk and restore the momentum of the Eastern Front. This will be the turning point, he promised. But unknown to him, the Soviets were ready. Through brilliant deception and captured intelligence, they knew every detail of his plan down to the hour of attack. They built miles of trenches, tank traps, and hidden artillery nests. Behind those defences waited more than 1 million Soviet soldiers and 5,000 tanks dug in like iron. Still, Hitler believed sheer willpower could change destiny. On July 5, 1943, German offensive began. Tigers and panthers roared forward, the earth shaking beneath their treads, the air filled with smoke, dust, and the metallic thunder of war. At first, the Germans advanced, but the deeper they went, the deadlier it became. Every hill was mined, every field was a killing zone. Soviet T-34 appeared from behind ridges like ghosts swarming the heavier but slower German armour. For days the battle raged, brutal, unrelenting, apocalyptic. Then came Prokhorovka, one of the largest tank clashes in history. In a single day, over 1,000 tanks turned the fields into a sea of fire and twisted steel. The German spearhead was blunted. Their offensive stopped cold. When Hitler received the reports, his face went pale. Not just because of the losses, but because for the first time he realized he no longer controlled the tempo of war. His decisive battle had failed before it began. Worse still, news arrived that the Allies had invaded Sicily. The dream of conquering the East while keeping the West secure shattered. The war was now slipping from his hands in every direction. After Kursk, Hitler withdrew from public appearances. He avoided briefings, snapped at generals, and forbade any talk of retreat. He ranted that his commanders were traitors, that his soldiers lacked faith. Guderian tried to reason with him, saying, "My Führer, we no longer have the men or machines." Hitler cut him off. Faith in victory is stronger than numbers. But in the dim corridors of the Wolf's Lair, officers began to whisper. The man who once terrified Europe was now terrified of reality. Kursk had not only destroyed Germany's last hope of winning East, it had destroyed Hitler's last illusion of control. June 6, 1944. The dawn sky above Normandy burns with the flashes of artillery. Allied ships stretch across the horizon, more than 5,000 of them. The greatest armada in human history is crossing the English Channel. Operation Overlord has begun. In a forest deep in East Prussia, Adolf Hitler is asleep. His aides, terrified of waking him, hesitate as urgent messages pour in. At 5 in the morning, the news is confirmed. Paratroopers have landed in Normandy beaches, codenamed Utah Omaha, Gold Juno Sword, all under assault. But no one dares disturb him until nearly 10. When he finally wakes, he reacts with disbelief. This is not the invasion, he snaps. It's a diversion. The real landing will come in the Pas de Calais. His voice is calm, too. Calm. He's convinced that the Allies are bluffing. Hours pass, reports stream in. The Allies are advancing inland, establishing beachheads, capturing towns. But Hitler refuses to release the panzer divisions held in reserve. He insists they must stay near Calais, waiting for an invasion that will never come. His obsession with control becomes paralysis. By nightfall, the beaches are secured. The Allies have broken through. It is the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Inside the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's fury erupts, throws his pencil against the wall, shattering it into splinters. He blames the weather, the generals, even the tides, everyone but himself. "The fools have betrayed me again," he screams, pacing in circles. But beneath the anger lies something else, fear. For years he had boasted that Germany would never fight another two-front war. Yet now it had returned just as in 1914, and this time there would be no miracle recovery. In the weeks that follow, as Allied bombers turn German cities into ruins, Hitler grows more withdrawn. He stops listening to intelligence briefings. He begins giving orders based on maps that no longer match reality. When generals beg him to pull back from France, he explodes, "I will not retreat." The German soldier does not retreat. By August, Paris is liberated. Hitler refuses to believe it, demanding that the city be destroyed, burned to the ground. But his orders go ignored. Even his most loyal officers are beginning to see the truth. The war he thought he could shape by will alone is now shaping him, twisting him into a man unrecognizable, even to those who once worshipped him. And as the Western Front collapses, so too does the facade of destiny he built around himself. For the first time, Hitler knows, though he'll never admit it, that defeat is no longer a possibility. It is inevitable. July 20th, 1944. It is a humid morning at the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. Hitler greets a group of officers for a routine conference on the Eastern Front. Among them is Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg, a war hero wounded in battle, who carries a briefcase in his left hand. He sets it down quietly beneath the table, near Hitler's feet. Minutes later, Stauffenberg excuses himself, leaving the room. The meeting continues. Voices echo, papers rustle, then a flash. A violent explosion tears through the bunker, shattering windows, collapsing walls, and flinging men across the room. Smoke fills the air, shouts panic blood. Wolf's Lair erupts in chaos. When the smoke clears, Hitler is alive. Stunned, his uniform, ripped eardrums, bleeding but alive. 4 officers are dead, dozens wounded. The wooden conference table, not the steel bunker, had saved him. When he appears hours later before his staff, his face is pale but burning with fury. He lifts his right arm trembling, wrapped in bandages. "Providence has preserved me," he says, but inside something else has snapped. For years, Hitler believed himself chosen, a man of destiny, protected by fate. Now he sees betrayal in every shadow. If even his most trusted officers, decorated heroes of the Reich, have turned against him, then who can be trusted? The investigation is swift and merciless. Thousands are arrested. Officers are hanged with piano wire, their executions filmed for Hitler's private viewing. Families of conspirators are imprisoned or executed. The German officer corps, once a proud institution, is gutted. That day marks a turning point. Until then, Hitler had at least pretended to listen to his generals. After the assassination attempt, he stops completely. He isolates himself, surrounding his inner circle only with those who flatter him, Goebbels, Bormann, and a handful of loyal secretaries. He no longer trusts strategy or logic or reality. He begins to speak of divine missions and vengeance, of a war of faith rather than reason. In one speech he declares, "Faith will replace knowledge, and fanatics will replace cowards." It is no longer about victory, it is about destruction. As he limps through the ruined halls of the Wolf's Lair, his right arm trembling uncontrollably, his eyes dark and distant, the transformation is complete. The commander has become a prisoner, not of his enemies, but of his own delusion. And from that day on, every decision he makes will carry Germany closer to ruin. The winter of 1945 was colder than any before, and for Germany darker than ever. The Red Army was unstoppable now. From the Vistula River to the Oder, Soviet tanks rolled westward, like a steel tide crushing the last remnants of the once invincible Wehrmacht. In city after city, chaos reigned. Civilians fled in endless columns, women pushing carts, children clinging to their mothers, soldiers limping beside them. They called it the flight from the east. Behind them, the thunder of Soviet artillery echoed across the frozen plains. Yet, in the Führerbunker in Berlin, buried beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler refused to believe the reports. He sat, hunched over maps that no longer represented reality. Entire divisions marked in blue pencil still fought on paper, though in truth they no longer existed. His generals tried to reason with him. "My Führer," one said, "we have no reserves. The front has collapsed." Hitler's eyes flared. "Lies. You are defeatists. You lack faith." He slammed his trembling fist on the table, shouting that miracle, weapons, new jets, new rockets would soon turn the tide. But those weapons existed only in propaganda. The atmosphere in the bunker grew, unbearable. Even his closest staff avoided eye contact, terrified of triggering his rage. When Heinrich Himmler suggested negotiations with the Allies, Hitler exploded. He called him a traitor, one more name on an ever-growing list of enemies that now included almost everyone outside Soviet artillery, could already be heard faintly in the distance. Berlin's streets filled with rubble, smoke, and despair. Yet Hitler still believed in phantom armies, the Steiner Group, the Ninth Army forces that would somehow launch a counterattack and save the capital. His generals nodded, but everyone knew those units were ghosts. At night, in quieter moments, he spoke differently. Secretaries recalled him muttering, "The war is lost. The German people have failed me." He began to speak not of victory but of vengeance. "If we are defeated," he said, "then the nation does not deserve to survive." This was no longer strategy, it was nihilism. The man who once dreamed of a thousand-year Reich now fantasized about taking Germany down with him. He ordered cities, destroyed bridges, blown industries, leveled scorched earth, a suicide note to history. As the Red Army advanced to the Oder only 70 kilometers from Berlin, his generals made one last attempt. "My Führer, you must leave the capital," they pleaded. "We can still move you south." He refused. "I will fight here," he said coldly, "or I will fall here." And so the fate of the war and of Hitler himself was sealed. What began in triumph on the fields of Poland was now ending in the rubble of his own capital. The war was over in everything but name. Only Hitler refused to see it. April 1945. Berlin is burning. The Red Army's artillery has reached the city, shaking the earth day. And night, smoke rolls through the streets as civilians cower in basements, listening to the distant roar of tanks closing in. Deep beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler sits in the Führer bunker, pale, shaking, almost unrecognizable. Once firm posture is gone. His hands tremble uncontrollably. His speech slurred, his eyes dull and watery. He spends hours moving imaginary divisions on a map, issuing orders to units that have already been destroyed. Reality has completely slipped away. Reports arrive every hour. Soviet forces are encircling the city. Himmler has attempted secret peace talks. Göring has declared himself Hitler's successor. The Reich he built is collapsing from within. When he hears of Göring's actions, Hitler erupts in rage, screaming, foaming veins bulging at his temples. He orders Göring's arrest, then Himmler's. The paranoia that began after Stauffenberg's bomb has now consumed him entirely. Outside, Berlin is dying. German soldiers, some barely teenagers, fight street by. Street, armed with Panzerfausts and desperation, but it's hopeless. The Soviets are only a few miles from the bunker. Still, Hitler refuses to surrender. Berlin will hold. He insists, pounding the table with his trembling fist. Even as he says it, the walls shake with the sound of explosions above. On April 22nd, during a briefing, General Weidling tells him the truth. There are no more reserves, no fuel, no ammunition. For a moment, silence fills the room. Then Hitler breaks down witnesses. Say he collapsed into a chair, staring blankly ahead. "Everything is lost," he whispered. "The war is lost." For the first time in 12 years, the man who ruled through fear sounded human, defeated, but only for a moment. Within hours, he returns to denial, speaking again of phantom divisions that will attack from the north. He dictates his political testament, blaming the generals, the army, the Jews, anyone but himself. He claims history will vindicate him, that future generations will understand his struggle. By April 28th, he hears that Mussolini has been captured and executed by partisans. His body strung upside down in Milan. Hitler reads the report in silence. Then he says quietly, "That will never happen to me." The next day, April 29th, he marries Eva Braun in a small ceremony inside the bunker. She wears a simple black dress. He, a grey uniform. Goebbels and Bormann stand as witnesses. Afterward, they share a modest meal, champagne, and a brief toast to the end. Early the next morning, Hitler dictates his final will. At 3:30 in the afternoon on April 30th, 1945, he retreats with Eva into his private room. Those waiting outside hear a single sharp sound, then silence. When the door is opened, it's over. The man who once sought to command the world has chosen to vanish from it. Above ground, Berlin burns as the Red Army storms the ruins. Below, the bunker falls quiet, lit only by the dull flicker of candles and the echo of a war that has finally consumed its master. The sun rises over a shattered Berlin casting. Long shadows on the rubble-strewn streets. A solitary Soviet soldier raises a tattered flag above the Reichstag, a symbol not of conquest but of survival. The city lies in ruins, the dream of empire, extinguished. For Adolf Hitler, the moment he first glimpsed defeat in the frozen wasteland of Stalingrad was the beginning of a slow, relentless collapse. His vision of domination, once so vivid and terrifying, had been consumed by obsession, denial, and a refusal to face reality. History would remember him not as a great conqueror, but as a man blinded by his own myth, a cautionary figure whose downfall warns of the dangers when power turns to fanaticism. And yet, behind the headlines and monuments, behind the textbooks and films, lies a chilling truth. The day Hitler realized he couldn't win the war was not a single moment, but a series of fractures, each one pushing him further into isolation, paranoia, and despair. That slow unraveling changed the course of history and shaped the world we live in today. In the end, the empire of fear died quietly in a bunker beneath a burning city, as the world turned the page to a new, uncertain chapter.